Welcome everyone to the webinar, Making the Connection, NEPF and the ELD Standards Framework. Thank you for joining us. If you just joined, feel free to type in the chat your name and where you're joining us from. It's really great to see everyone in here. And Pam, I'm going to hand it over to you as we are recording today's event.
Great, thank you, Julie. Welcome everyone. We are very, very excited to see everyone here. My name is Pam Spiescher and I work for the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd. The Region 15 Comprehensive Center is one of 19 federally funded regional comprehensive centers, and the comprehensive centers, our role is to provide capacity building, technical assistance, content expertise, and resources to state education agencies like Nevada, the Nevada Department of Education. We at the Region 15 Comprehensive Center have been collaborating with our NDE colleagues as thought partners on this project. And I'm joined by our Region 15 Comprehensive Center colleagues, Rachel Lagunov, Haiwen Xu, Julie Deffield, and Delphine Kwan today. And it's a pleasure for us to be here. I believe, Julie, you may be doing some housekeeping before I make introductions.
Yes, just making sure that we've muted everyone. So your best way to communicate your questions, your reflections is using the chat. So thank you everyone for typing in your introductions into the chat. We'll remain on mute. And if you have any questions, you can put your hand up. We have tech support, myself, Julie Deffield, and Delphine Kwan. We'll be using Padlet today. And if you don't know what Padlet is, don't worry. We have a plan B to use the chat and we'll be showing a video. So without any further ado, back to you, Pam.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here today. Basically my next job is to introduce the stars of today's webinar. Our colleagues from the Nevada Department of Education, Dr. Kowadi Axtel and Dr. Sofia Misavich, and they are going to share with you some very important and exciting connections between the NEPF and the ELD Standards Framework. So over to you, Kul and Sophia.
So thank you, Pam, for that introduction. And I want to just thank the WestEd team for really helping to guide some of this work. There have been a lot of people involved in this work, but I'd like to thank you for joining today, all of the participants. And we finally got winter here in Las Vegas. So I am Sofia Misavich, and my office is here in Las Vegas for the Nevada Department of Education. And my colleague, Dr. Kowadi Axtel, is actually in Carson City. And so we welcome you today. And I think this is really very important work. It's one of the deliverables that we have with the ELD Standards Framework Initiative. And so this document is really for all educators, because throughout our state, the NEPF is used as part of the coaching and evaluative processes that we have in our states for most of our districts and some of our charters. The document you will see today is an alignment of the ELD Standards Framework and the NEPF Standards. So of this great expectation and excitement around this document, these teacher moves of best practices for English learners in this document, one of the features would be an illustration of examples in action. These are done through vignettes and videos, the things that educators have actually asked us for. Next slide. So in this next slide, which is why we do this work, if you could go back just one more, I'm sorry. If you could go back just one slide, please. Yes, let's talk about why the NEPF and the ELD Standards Framework connection. For one thing in this slide, in this particular document, is that it is the work of all educators. It is a shared responsibility of all of us. And so it is essential that English learners have access to rigorous standard-based instruction to be college and career ready. The document also provides the kind of show and tell examples in action for educators to think about their practices in lesson planning for the language and the content or the academic needs of English learners. DLD practices included in lesson planning and applied in instruction are also artifacts that can be used in the NEPF processes and procedures. And lastly, district and school leaders will find the NEPF and the ELD Standards Framework alignment very useful for teacher support, instructional coaches, professional development or learning, PLCs, or communities of practice. So my colleague, Dr. Kwadi Axtell, will present information on the alignment and the connection in the next few slides. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Sophia. As Sophia mentioned, so the purpose of this webinar today is to introduce Nevada's educator to the NEPF ELD document. So in document, we will show the alignment and also example in action with videos, a vignette. So then with that, I mean, we will, from the first part, I will be presenting how the two standards, the NEPF and ELD standards connect. So that will be part of that. And then later on, Sophia will take you to go deeper on what and how the document look like with the sample. And you will have the chance to see the video clip and sample of vignettes. So next slide, please, Julie. Thank you.
I think we'll just bring up a poll.
Yes. So before we talk about a connection, so we would just like to see how are you familiar with the NEPF standard? I mean, I saw some of my colleagues from Life, Kat and Alberto here. So let's see how people are familiar with the NEPF. We're using the 4-point scale, you know, to do the poll. So 1 is not at all familiar. So 2, a little familiar, and then 3, somewhat familiar, 4, really familiar. So we actually have the 5th one for expert. So that's probably Kat, one of that, because you are here. So that is really good news. Look at that. So we have over 50% for somewhat and really familiar in there. So then really familiar with 39. So I'm not surprised at all because we have been implementing that NEPF for quite some time, and I know that some of our districts may not using that, but I'm pretty sure that our educators have been informed or have seen the NEPF standards.
So we'll just quickly publish the results. There you are.
Yeah, thank you. So that I see that. So it's pretty good. I mean, we have only 5 people, 12% who are not familiar, but don't worry about it. I will take you through that. So yeah, so then will we be able to go for the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So for this slide, basically, just want to show you how the two standards, I mean the NEPF standard and ELD standard framework, how they are connected. So then don't worry about it. We would break it down for the next slide. But for this one, as you've seen on the top, you will see the ELD standard for supporting development of academic language across the content. So you will see Actually, that one is for like teacher move ELD. The teacher move in ELD standard framework, for processing language, for the producing language, and collaborating in the language of the content, and also formative assessment. So you will see in different color, in different dots. So that was just how it connects. So on the top row in the table, so you will see in each column that has included 5 different standards from the NEPF. And then in each column, you will see the indicator underneath that. So most of them have 4 indicators. Some have only 1 standard number 4 that had 3 indicators. The indicators mean what teacher need to demonstrate, to meet in that standard. So for this one, the teacher move for ELD standard for example, for processing language. So that means what support can teacher provide to students at different language proficiency level in order to help them in processing academic language in all language domains, like speaking, reading, writing, and listening. So, but then I will take you to different breakdown, like I said. So next slide, please. So for this slide, we show only the NEPF standard. So again, just like you see in here, so we have really clear. So then just want to have you seen just without the ELD standard in there. So then, for example, you will see standard number 1, new learning is connected to prior learning or experience. So underneath that, you will see indicator 1, 2, 3, 4. So that each indicator means, what teacher needs to demonstrate to meet the standard 1. And then that will be the same for standard number 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the next slide, I will show you how then each ELD standard will connect to the NEPF. So for this one, we will looking at the first ELD standard, the teacher move in ELD standard for processing language. So just so you, because the previous slide is just so busy, so I will just give you some samples on this one. So Julie, yes, can you just please, yeah. So you will see standard
we're getting a little cute. We're getting a little feedback from your, I want to move back a little bit? I feel we're hearing a little sound back. So could you move back a little when you speak? Thanks.
Okay, would that be better?
Yeah, just see if that, I think that's a bit better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for letting me know. Yes, so for this slide, we're showing some sample on standard number 1. Again, standard 1 is for NEPF as new learning is connected to prior learning or prior experience. So then you will see the teacher move in ELD standard for processing language. So what kind of support, what can teacher do to support students to process the language, academic language? So then you will see the connection there. Under standard 1, you will see the connection to indicator 1 and indicator 2. So teacher activate all students' initial understanding of new concept and skill. So that connect to when teacher does that, so student will be able to process academic language in the content. So the next sample we have for this slide will be sample on the standard number 3. Julie, if you can just bring up for the next column for standard 3, thank you. Here for standard 3, you will see the connection for teacher move, what can support that teacher can provide for a student to process the language. You see connection at the indicator number 3. And the next slide will be very similar. So, but that will be a teacher move mentioned in the ELD standard framework for producing language. So again, for this slide, we were showing sample of standard number 2 and the standard number 5. So you will see the connection on that when teacher provides support for producing language to connect to indicator 2. Task place appropriate demands on each student. So when teacher do that, it will be a great support for English learner or student to be able to produce academic language. But then you will see for standard number 5, this connect to all in 4 indicators. So that how we want you to see when you see our document that we posted, you will see how what that dot meant. So next slide, please. So similar to the first 2 slides, but this one will be teacher moves in the ELD standards framework for collaborating in language. So again, just so you can see it better, we just give example for standard number 2 and then standard, I believe standard 3. So if you can bring that up. So then for here, so how can teacher provide ongoing opportunity for students to collaborate using academic language? So that is how, so how would you set up your learning setting or environment that allow or encourage students to collaborate among each other, right? So you will see that the connection under standard 2 for indicator 2 and 4, and then for standard 3, the connection will be for indicator 1 and 4. So next slide, please. Yes, so by now, I'm pretty sure that you get a clear picture how that connects. So this one is the teacher move mentioned in ELD standard framework for formative assessment. How it looked like when students communicate or demonstrate their learning of language or content, right? So that you will see for standard 5, which means assessment is integrated into instruction. Of course, that one you will see the connection for all 4 indicators. And then, but for standard number 2, so you see a connection there just for indicator 2. So we kind of go on that so you can see how that connected. So the next slide, it will be for all. So then again, we showed that earlier, but now just in case you miss it, so then you get a chance to see this is how it looked like, just to show the connection. Okay, so for the next slide, I would turn this over to my colleague Sophia to present, the 2 standard, the alignment and how the guidance and how and also show some example for the next 0 slides. Thank you, Sophia.
Well, thank you, Cool. And I'm just looking at our time, and we definitely want to have you engage in looking at this document and viewing it a slightly closer than what we presented. And as you can see, those dots, color-coded dots, match up with what we need to do as educators to help English learners process, produce language, collaborate with peers, and also teacher moves to formatively assess students' language development and content. So here's one of the documents certainly we're speaking of, and this is the new Nevada ELD Standards Framework. We did a webinar back in November on this, so I don't expect people to be very familiar with this, but this document has actually been in development and pushed out over a 3-year period. So I'm going to do a quick poll with you. So if you would bring that poll up. So tell us how familiar, what's your awareness of? It's really the awareness of the new ELD standards framework. If you could do that so quickly.
We're nearly halfway there. Thank you everyone for doing the poll. And Sophia, you can see lots of somewhat
Okay.
awares. That's
Yeah,
great.
so that's wonderful because we have had educators to create and develop the ELD standards framework, and also having educators from across the state involved in some of the facilitative workshops that we have done. So thank you so much for participating in that. We'll close the poll at this time, and that's really great news. So let me just kind of briefly go over the ELD standards framework with you, just to recall that this is a new framework for Nevada. And within this framework itself, it has what we call the instructional guidance documents, and they are in the 4 areas of ELA, social studies, math, and science. So the slide that you see now in front of you is really screenshots of, for example, one of our examples of the ELD standards framework for developing the language of language arts. And this happens to be for grades 4 through 5. And on the right side of this slide, you'll see a screenshot that really walks through the different components. This is really the content of the framework itself. It is the ELD standards framework in sections 1 and 2. And then we go into section 3 with instructional guidance documents. And these are organized around the disciplinary practices of the content. So won't spend any more time on this. This is a document that is available on our website. It's a document used for planning, for professional development, and really helping us all to negotiate and understand what we need to do in terms of preparing English learners to be successful, language development and in content simultaneously. It is for all teachers. Let's move on. I'd like to show you just the next slide, please. Great. So in this particular slide, this is the snapshot of the cover page of the document for the NEPF standards and the ELD standards framework, alignment, guidance, and resources. This one is for grades K-5. There are actually 2 different documents that we have. One for the elementary K-5, and then there's a secondary document. And this document was developed with in the collaboration of the Nevada Department of Education's Educator Effectiveness and Family Engagement Division, where the work of the NEPF resides, and with the Student Achievement Division, Title III, English Learners, and of course, our partners, Region 15 Comprehensive Center, West Ed. So let's go into this document to take a look. First, next slide. What I like to do right now, before we can even talk about the document, is really talk about what were the guiding principles of the ELD standards framework that connected to the NEPF. So the first principle that we looked at is the principle that's connecting to the standard. The NEPF standard is standard 1, the new learning is connected to prior learning and experience. That guiding principle that connected to that NEPF standard is around how teachers recognize and value the EL students' assets, their home language, their cultural assets, their existing knowledge, their prior schooling experiences, and English language and translanguaging abilities. Teachers leverage those. Next principle, please. This principle is also connected to Standard 2. Learning tasks have high cognitive demands for diverse learners. We talked about that learners must have, English learners must have access to standards-based instruction, and that meeting the standards, the high cognitive demands of the standards. So this principle, teachers provide robust grade level and content standards-based instruction to English learners. Now look at with intentional scaffolding designed to support their content. And the next slide, please. And standard 3, students engage in meaning making through discourse and other strategies. So our principle 3 provides frequent opportunities for ELs to engage in extended discourse. Now we do like to see certainly turn and talk, but we're talking extended discourse structures for students to use the language, oral language, in writing, kinesthetic or visual, other modes of communication. And then in the fourth one, which is the fourth standard, students engage in metacognitive activities to increase understanding of their responsibility for their own learning. And so we can certainly develop this because we do want students to develop this autonomy and ownership of their own learning. And teachers actually have teacher moves, teacher practices, best practices to ensure that this happens. And then in standard 5, as we can see, the assessment is really an integral part of instruction. And we know that this guiding principle is really around the alignment of assessment practices, both formative and summative, and formative in really looking at the progression of language. The ELD Standards Framework is a great document because it is organized around the proficiency levels, the progression of language, level 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 5 and 6, so that teachers can really assess using formative assessment practices, observing the language that English learners are using and their progression. Let's move on, please. Thank you. Next slide. So in our next slide, again, some screenshots of the documents we just saw. And then certainly on the left side of the document, we have what Kul has actually talked through with you. And then on the right side of the document, we actually have a screenshot of that of the document that connects both the NEPF standards and the ELD Standards Framework. And we want to really look more deeply into this one. So next slide, please. So let's look at this. So somewhat as Kul has kind of walked you through the document to look at each of the components, I'll do a quick review of this document. This is the document that aligns both of the standards. And as you can see across the top, we have the NEPF standards and indicators with the guiding questions. We have the ELD recommended practices, and then we have those examples in action. So on the left column would be the standard, and this is an example of standard 1, new learning is connected to prior learning. And I believe Kul has already walked through the indicators with you. Look at that middle column. These recommended practices come directly from the ELD framework, standards framework. And as we look at the middle column, When we talk about standard 1, new learning is connected to prior learning and experience. We know that teachers, 1, need to build the background knowledge in key language and concepts that other students are expected to have and gain through prior learning and experience. The coding that you see in that middle column for that particular recommended practice is the instructional practice standard 1, indicator 1, and standard 1, indicator 2. This particular recommended practice is connected to those 2 indicators. And as you look at the middle column, you can see, for example, provide language frames to develop questions and responses. This comes directly. This is to help teachers understand what are some of those practices that we need to ensure that we do so that students have the academic language, that we model the language, both in presentation and in providing these supports and scaffolding supports so that students can develop their academic language. So then, let's go on to the third column, the last column. These are the examples in action. This is what we've heard across our state. It is the show me and not tell. So we have a video that's going to demonstrate a practice or practices connected to the standard. In this case, we have a video titled Text Construction, Coral Reef Informational Text. And this video is only 2 minutes and 55 seconds. There will be short videos that you will be able to see. Some of them may be tagged to show different recommended practices, and you will see the grade level, in this case is grade K1, and is connected to the NEPF Standard Practice 1 and indicators as those codings would indicate. There's also a vignette. Now at this time, the body and the largest collection of vignettes that we have are actually from the California Department of Education. And as many of you know, they have done some extensive work over the last 10 years for developing the academic language within content in their documents. So this is a vignette, and it also will illustrate, show, and demonstrate the standard and the indicators. So what I like to do right now is just kind of show and tell myself. So if we can go on to slide 21, we're going to engage in kind of looking at this. And the purpose for looking at the video is for us to begin to think about and reflect on how we might use this, how this might help us really in terms of going deeper into the NEPF to really understand those best practices for English learners and all other students who are not yet proficient in the academic language and in the content. So these are practices that are really beneficial and specifically for English learners, the must-dos in many of these practices, but also will help other learners who are not yet proficient in the academic language of the discipline itself. So I would like to have you look at this 2-minute plus video so that you can get a feel of how the practices are being demonstrated. So here's the question for you. And in the chat, we'll just take a few minutes after the video is completed for you to kind of record your responses. So we're looking at standard 1. The new learning is connected to prior learning experiences. And we have some ELD recommended practices around teacher moves to build background knowledge, provide language frames, to be really explicit in the discussion. So,
Thank you. And before we go, if folks would like to watch the closed captioning, you can go to the bottom of your screen and choose show subtitle. Thank you, Sophia.
okay,
Do you
so
want to add
let's,
something to that, Sophia?
no, that'd be wonderful. Let's get going with this one because I know we have a few other things to cover before we kind of get to the end and do some reflection on this.
Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, Ms. Johnson.
Today we're going to be starting a new unit, learning about the coral reef. I found this text written by Steve Parker. It is informational text. The author wrote the story to inform us. Inform means teach. We're going to learn a lot of information. We're going to start today doing a lesson on text reconstruction. I just used a really big word. I've never said that word before. So you might be wondering, what is a text reconstruction? The goal is that we're going to reconstruct a text about the coral reef. Again, what does reconstruction mean? Let's look here. Reconstruction and deconstruction. I found two images to show what they mean. Could you please look at those images? Think about reconstruction or deconstruction. Now, get in pair share position in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Eye to eye, knee to knee. Please talk to your partner. What do you think reconstruction and deconstruction are?
I think reconstruction means building, and I understand a construction. Which one? Means I think
Back with me in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ready, position, show. Okay, would anyone like to share out what they think reconstruction or deconstruction means? I select Aya.
Check the speaker.
Reconstruction means that they're building it again. And deconstruction means that they're breaking it apart.
Thank you, Aya. Would anyone have a different idea? Or maybe you'd like to add on? I select Emmanuel. Track the speaker.
Actually, I could clarify that. Reconstruction means they're making a new building. And deconstruction means they're breaking the old building.
Thank you.
No.
Can anyone, have you ever heard another word, maybe in math, about something, putting something together? Something together. Or breaking something apart. Can anyone make a connection with math about?
okay, I think we're ready to kind of put some things in the chat if you would. And that would be, what teacher moves did you notice? And then just take a few minutes to record that in the chat. So this is an example of a video. It's focused on standard 1 of the NEPF and also the ELD practices that are recommended. So if you would take just a minute to do that. Excellent. Academic language. Pictures, yes, of deconstruction and reconstruction. Connection to math. Language structures reinforced. Yes, using the images to show reconstruction and deconstruction. Structures for discourse. Visuals and vocabulary. Thank you so much. And real life too. Thank you. All right. So as we move forward in just a few minutes that we have, The other thing that we want to do is, if we can move to slide 23, that'd be great. I won't go through the vignette, but I want you to see what the vignettes look like in this document. So you will be able to look at these. This is an example of a vignette for grade 4. It's writing biographies, integrated ELA and social studies instruction in grade 4. And if the the left screenshot really is around the background knowledge. It tells about the lesson unit and the connection across grade levels for informational writing. It talks about the lesson content. The middle screenshot is really a template, a structured scaffold to help the students really organize around the sequencing and understanding of biographies. And then, of course, what I really liked in the third screenshot was really the learning targets. And of course, the standards are there, but the learning target is a combination of a language and content outcome goal for this lessons or lessons. And so as we sometimes struggle with what's the language goal and what's the content, you will find these examples of how the combination of language and content actually works together. Next slide.
So I think on here we still have I think we have some time so to get your response and reflect on what you have heard. So here the time that you can go to your Padlet. I believe Haiwan have placed that URL for Padlet in the chat. So if you would please type your response. So on what connection are you making to your own practice or role? Based on your role, you will see, on the Padlet, it look like what the screenshot that we have on the screen that you see right now. So then just underneath that by your role and practices in there. So then also, what are you thinking or planning of using the resources? If you would please type that in the Padlet. So we would like to see your response there. Also from the chat, look like when I'm reading, a lot of people asking if we have this, Sophia, if we have this document on our website yet. I mean, we have not posted that there yet. I mean, we can probably put a sample, post that sample first, but for the whole document by content and grade level. I mean, we in the process of reviewing, asking educators in our state, helping us in reviewing videos and vignettes. So it is still in the process. Just want to let you know. Thank you.
And for those of you who didn't see it in the chat in that response, this document will be available the first week of March. So for both the K-12 and also 6 through 12 in those content areas of ELA, social studies, math, and science. So this work is very promising in terms of its potential impact to really show what it looks like when we go deep in terms of understanding of those practices for English learners.
Oh, this is really neat. Thank you. I mean, we see all educators in different except from the higher ed. Thank you, Pam, for design that template for us. It looked like we have, quite a few administrators and instructional coaches, learning facilitators. So that's excellent. We only have one column left that's for higher ed, but we didn't have someone there participate in this webinar.
Would you like me to share the Padlet for everyone, or are you?
Oh, that would be
yes.
excellent. Yeah.
Yes, I would like
Thank
to
you.
see it. Yes,
Thank you,
me too.
Julie, because I kind of looked at on my end. Thank you.
Okay. As we're doing that, we were playing some music. We can do that again. Share. So I'm assuming you can.
Neato.
You can see the Padlet.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Just scroll down for you. Just let me know where you'd like to scroll. Thank you everyone for completing the Padlet.
I saw Colleen who mentioned about student moves within the ELD Standards Framework. There is a section that's called Student Language Expectations, which are the can-do descriptors across the proficiency level. That document will be very helpful in terms of having those language expectations for the progression of language and keeping those in mind. Thank you so much. Hey, we have people from across different roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, I would say that's
And
really cool.
really appreciate. Here's the question. Are these the new language standards for WIDA? These are not. These are not. The 2020 edition of the ELD standards for WIDA was just rolled out, as you know, in December. This work has been in progress. The difference when we get to really pushing that out and really developing the ELD, the 2020 edition, and having some webinars and workshops on that will be after a significant implementation of this work. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not going to delay the conversations, but the ELD 2020 edition of WIDA really is a high-level overview. This is when we go deep. We go deep in the ELD Standards Framework, and we go deep in these other documents. We are connected to the 2020 WIDA edition of their ELD standards. All right, then. This is so wonderful to see.
I know. This is very good.
All right. As we kind of move to close, I believe, are there any questions?
Thank you, Sophia. Yeah.
Are there any questions?
We still invite you if you have any question, anything you want to share, please keep sharing that, type that in the chat. We will capture all that, even though we may not be able to respond verbally. So at this point, I just also like to take this opportunity to remind you that our next webinar on general ELD practices in learning planning across content area will be hosted on Tuesday, the same time, 3:30 to 4:30 on February 9. So all webinar series registration available on NDE ELD homepage. So then you can register in advance. So yes, please remember to do that and share with your educators. And again, all the webinar will be recorded if you can make it. And we will put that webinar archive on our website as well. So I would like to ask my colleague Sophia to do a closing for the webinar today, just for the interest of time. Thank you.
Oh, yes. So there was one question about how will these documents be disseminated? These documents will be online the 1st of March, in the first week of March, under the NDE English Language Learners tab, and most of you know how to get there. So that's where all of these documents are found. The ELD Standards Framework, any guidance documents, they're all located on the NDE website under the English Language Learners tab. I do want to just kind of excite you about our next webinar. We're going to kind of take a look at discourse and engagement. We've heard, and particularly in this environment around hybrid and distance learning, is to ensure that we have meaningful engagement. So the next one is around the general ELD standards practices. That's the framework at the beginning. And then let's kind of focus on one of the standards, particularly that we've heard across our conversations with district leaders and teachers. I like to close. Here are our contacts. You can contact us at any time. Kawadi Axtell, Sophia Masavage, and this is our certainly email. I'd like to thank all of you for participating and our colleagues at West Ed who have worked with us throughout these developments of a number of documents. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Please put your questions in chat. We're capturing the chat. We'll be closing and officially ending this webinar in about 30 seconds. Thank you. If you could finish up posting your questions, we're just ending the webinar officially.